Hello everyone, I'm James from Hidden Legend Gaming, and welcome to my humble abode. Hey look, we have a camera now, because apparently even in the smallest of YouTube channels, it's good to look professional. Today I present to you my list for my top 10 favorite video game soundtracks of all time. Let's be honest, video games would be missing a big part of their appeal if none of them featured any musical accompaniment. Whether used to set the mood, help drive a player towards their ultimate goal, or simply to keep the player's journey from being an empty one, music will always be a key component to most video games. This video is to outline my personal 10 favorite soundtracks in games, ones that have either affected me in some way, or have stuck with me over the years. Or perhaps even ones that are so good on their own terms that I listen to them on a daily basis, outside of the context of the game. Remember that this is my opinion and is a subjective list, so if there is a game that is not on here that you swear in your life deserves to be there, it is probably that either A, I've never played the game before and so cannot judge the soundtrack, or B, I just don't agree with you. Because opinions. So without further ado, here's my list. Enjoy.
Opinions suck.
Hey, fuck you. V's, V6, VVV is a game that I picked up on a whim on the 3DS sometime in late 2013. I had glanced over some gameplay footage online, and its simplistic design and controls, with a pretty steep challenge, intrigued me enough to pick it up soon after. Everything about the game screams retro, including the soundtrack, but I can honestly say that I was completely surprised by how great the game and its music were overall. The soundtrack features chiptune songs that fit right into the outer space sci-fi aesthetic and setting that the game provides, with spacey and melodic choruses permeating most of the songs, and getting stuck in your head even when you finish playing. The soundtrack for this game also succeeds in being one of those collections of songs that I find myself listening to on a daily basis outside of the game. There were a few weeks where it was the only thing I listened to on my commute to and from work, and that's 5 days a week. There is something so infectious about the songs in this game. The beautiful and relentless melodies get stuck in your head, and the overall up-tempo sound and beat will keep you coming back for more. The chiptune style that composer Magnus Paulsson uses is so pleasing to the ears that I even use the power-up and level complete sounds as my text tone and ringtone respectively. While the game and soundtrack are relatively new to me, never have I so quickly latched onto a soundtrack in my life. For those who haven't played the game, it is well worth it to pick it up and play it, and for those who haven't heard the soundtrack, it's definitely worth a listen. This may be one of the more controversial entries on this list since, well, the game doesn't have much of a soundtrack at all. One thing that is very obvious from my list is that I enjoy games whose music and sound match and meld with the mood and atmosphere of the overall game. And that is really the beauty of Limbo. Its incredible minimalist atmospheric themes and setting are perfectly complemented by an equally contained soundtrack. Most of the game consists of clear and distinct sound effects with no backing music at all. Footsteps, water flowing, and electricity are just some of the noises you will be hearing a lot of within the empty world that is Limbo. But when the game does feature music, it is all ambient abstract notes that never really go anywhere, but always invoke a feeling of loneliness and helplessness. Not only does the game Limbo feel like a state of limbo in its setting and gameplay, but the music itself also has a feeling of detachment and ambiguity. With no discernible notes or melodies to latch onto, the player is given more opportunity to create their own meaning and understanding of the sounds, music, and the world that encompasses them. It is the perfect approach to sound design for a game of such an utterly eerie and minimalist style. It is easy to go over the top with sound and music in horror games, but with such a subdued feeling that Limbo presents and provides, the amount and type of music provided for the game feels perfectly spot on. Castlevania on the NES encapsulates so much of what is great about retro gaming. It has an extremely challenging but fair difficulty, makes great use of the NES's color palette, and has an amazing track list of 8-bit tunes that suit the mood of the game entirely. The boldness and power of the game's music becomes evident at the very beginning when Simon Belmont walks up to the castle gate, with a driving riff that builds up the tension to a peak before throwing you right into the action. From there we get a nice and surprisingly varied soundtrack of classical and gothic-inspired 8-bit goodness, with some modern flair thrown in for good measure. Most of the songs feature a feeling of urgency that juxtaposes well with the narrative and goal of destroying several monsters on your linear adventure to find and slay Dracula. While most Castlevania games have great music, none are quite as iconic as the soundtrack of the original game, with songs like Vampire Killer going on to be used in some capacity or format in almost every Castlevania game to date. The Legend of Zelda series has had a ton of great songs and soundtracks over the years, but in terms of overall quality and how greatly memorable it is, Ocarina of Time has got to take the top spot. Some of the most iconic songs in video game history came from this game. The soundtrack's legacy is evident by the large amount of appropriation the songs within it have received. Anywhere from dubstep and electronica to the soothing a cappella of the great Smooth McGroove, the amount and quality of covers for these songs is astonishing. Nintendo succeeded in creating songs that all seem to suit the mood of their accompanied parts of the game. Some examples include the Song of Storms, which has a very mysterious and somewhat evil sound, which closely compares to the strange man with the music box in the windmill. Hyrule Field's main theme evokes feelings of optimism and adventure, which is a good guess to the emotion that Link is feeling as he departs his hometown. It's hard to describe just how good this soundtrack is, but at the end of the day, nearly all of the songs within the game are memorable and iconic in video gaming. I'll be pretty blunt, I'm not the biggest fan of J-pop. It's a little too cheesy for my liking. If you had told me 5 years ago that a JRPG soundtrack would have been among my favorites, I would have probably laughed heartily at your face. But alas, a year ago I picked up a game entitled Persona 4 for my PlayStation Vita, and among the many things that made this game so brilliant, its beautifully catchy soundtrack would be near the top of the list for me. I mean, sure, the music was still as cheesy as ever, but when looked at a little deeper, it became clear that there was more substance to these tracks than your average J-pop song. There was a wide range of emotions that varied from song to song, including heartbreak, sadness, glory, and determination, and each song fit whatever mood the game was presenting quite nicely. The soundtrack was also surprisingly well composed and crafted too, with a wide variety of subgenres throughout, the most prominent of which was a large jazz band feeling with some beautiful instrumentation and pretty solid vocals throughout. Without a doubt, what stands out most about this soundtrack is just how catchy and memorable each and every one of the songs are. I had them playing on full rotation on my iPod for weeks after I started playing the game, and I still listen to them pretty frequently today. The upbeat tempos, epic melodies, and catchy choruses kept me invested in the songs both within the game and outside in real life. There aren't many games that hit me quite as hard in the nostalgia feels as Banjo Kazooie. It was my favorite game on my favorite console growing up, and though my short attention span with games meant that I never beat it, it still held a place in my heart over the years, and is yearning to be played again when the opportunity arises. The Collectathon gameplay style was fun and addicting, and the presentation and characters were charming as ever. But what I will remember most about the game is its superb soundtrack. The great Grant Kirkhope strings together a fine group of songs that really captures the charming and cartoon-like vibe that the game presents from start to finish. Most of the songs contain a nice and bouncy beat that will get you excited to explore each level and be happy to do so. And no matter how many times you hear these songs repeat, they will never get tiring to hear. The theme song and the track for the opening level, Spiral Mountain, both perfectly present the country bumpkin personality that is Banjo, with a prominent country bluegrass sound and some heavy use of the main character's instrument namesake. With that said, each song feels quite different from the next depending on the setting, allowing for a great variety of songs that all feel similar stylistically. The constant demand by fans for a new true Banjo-Kazooie game is a testament to the level of quality Rare had back in the 1990s in all areas, not the least of which was their great music. If this list has revealed anything, it is that I have quite a fondness for NES 8-bit soundtracks. Another thing you might not know is that I'm quite fond of Mega Man. To be sure, I haven't played many of the games in the franchise and have beaten even less, but I love the games that I have played for their unique level designs, great gameplay mechanics, ridiculously fun boss battles, and of course, their rocking 8-bit soundtracks. My favorite game in the series, specifically, is Mega Man 2, and while Mega Man 3 is a close second, the former also has my favorite soundtrack of the series. Takashi Tateishi and Manami Matsume both crafted a variety of songs which, in my opinion, could easily legitimize the 8-bit music styles and art form on its own. These songs range from frantic to mellow in style, but all of them have an enveloping, epic feeling that really give you the idea that Mega Man's mission is something important and large, and really keep the player moving forward by driving the gameplay along. One of the most famous songs in the soundtrack, the theme for Dr. Wily's Castle, is probably the most awe-striking of them all, with a relentless triplet drum beat resting behind one of the most determined lead riffs I have ever heard in an NES game. Upon hearing it, you will know that your biggest challenge still lies ahead of you, and you will have an unwavering feeling that you can, and will, overcome it. 2011's Bastion is one of the most intimate video games I have ever experienced in my life. You play as a young boy, aptly named the Kid, who stumbles upon a bastion of safety after a cataclysmic event that destroys his world, and whose every move is narrated by what sounds like a solemn and weathered old man with the voice of an angel.
Years of work undone in an instant, in the calamity.
The atmosphere of the narrative and progression is akin to something like gathering around a campfire and telling a sad tale of old, and for the most part the songs in the game reflect the mood quite well. Most of the songs are melancholic in nature, and truly make you believe the great devastation that has befallen the people who live inside the game's world. The soundtrack as a whole also has a very grassroots and organic polish to it. Almost like the city of Caledonia, where the game takes place, was rocked by such a terrible life-changing event, and these songs were the first ones to come out of the rubble that were written by the survivors. The music serves as a companion to the rebuilding process that these people now face, a frontier of sorts. The best example of which is Spike in the Rail, which conveys the idea of building a railroad quite well. Darren Korb, the game's composer, does a fantastic job combining the acoustic and electronic elements that juxtapose perfectly with the world where the poor and downtrodden people live with some pretty high technology. It's a strange enough combination that it sounds completely unique, and Korb is such a talented songwriter that it also sounds amazing on its own merit. And the level of emotion that is evoked from these songs is like nothing I've ever experienced. The final credits song, Setting Sail, Coming Home, takes the cake as the most powerful, and nearly brought me to tears as I finished the game. While I was always more of a Nintendo kid growing up in the 90s, having a Sega Genesis at my grandma's place meant that I would turn to the dark side whenever we went and visited her. We only had 3 games for the thing: the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers fighting game, Booger Man, and my favorite of the 3, Sonic the Hedgehog 2. Maybe it's because I have it ingrained into my memory from playing the game so often in my early childhood, but the soundtrack for that game has always stuck with me my whole life as one of my favorite collection of video game tracks of all time. While most would probably say that the Super Nintendo had better sound quality and capabilities, and that their games had better music overall, there was something about the Genesis's more bass-heavy and harder rhythmic prevalence in games that struck a chord with me. And Sonic the Hedgehog 2 was no exception to this trend in the best way possible. With a heavy prominence of the bass sound, this soundtrack features many amazingly funky grooves, alongside some more jazzy pieces, futuristic and metal-inspired tracks, as well as some downright creepy themes. One of my favorite tracks is the theme for the Casino Night Zone, which is an amazing jazz-inspired song that would feel right at home in any casino or jazz bar and lounge, something I could even tell at age 6. And the slap bass main riff in the Mystic Cave Zone theme is something to behold. It is at the same time kind of a spooky tune while also being relentless in its delivery. This is one of the most exciting, vibrant, and energetic soundtracks I have ever heard, and it has always been one of my favorites. Hotline Miami's soundtrack is something to behold. With over 20 songs from an array of independent electronic artists, this collection of songs stands tall on its own, and for many people, myself included, was either the selling point or the first thing they noticed about the game. All of the songs are electronica, and each of the different artists on the album has their own unique style within the wider genre of electropop music. Some songs can be a droning, repetitive, and relentless beat, while still others contain some beautiful and soaring melodic choruses. One thing that almost all of them have in common, though, is that they all demand repeated listens due to their intricacies and catchy nature. The soundtrack also plays an essential role in the overall narrative and gameplay. The game takes place in the 1980s, and as such has a very prominent neon aesthetic and stylized polish. And while the music fits perfectly in with the emulation of the 80s lifestyle, as any one of these songs could have existed in the time period without question, it's how the music marries the gameplay and story so well that makes Hotline Miami's soundtrack so compelling. First of all, the thumping repetitive bass beats and melodic hooks can leave you in a sort of trance-like state, while you're also expected to repeatedly brutally kill one bad guy after another. The game wants you to get lost in the music as much as it wants you to grow accustomed to its ultra-violent gameplay, and the rhythm and flow that the music provides attempts to normalize and desensitize you to the entire experience. Secondly, in the transitional narrative moments between the violent gameplay, things tend to get a bit strange, and the music pushes that point further as well. Dissonant, disjointed notes and noise underlie some of the most surrealist and disorderly narrative moments I have ever experienced in a video game. This seamless juxtaposition with the music and the gameplay/narrative coupled with the fact that the songs are also really rad, makes Hotline Miami's soundtrack something really special. But above all else, Hotline Miami did one thing that no other game on this list managed to do. It introduced me to an entirely new and different genre of music that I never knew I would love so much. The soundtrack left me chomping at the bit to search for more of whatever I was hearing, and I soon came across a myriad of great French electropop artists such as Kavinsky and Danger, which I now listen to on a daily basis. Hotline Miami's soundtrack may not always be my favorite, but for now it's easily the most important and enriching. So there you have it. Those are my top 10 video game soundtracks of all time. If you like video game soundtracks, you should leave your favorites in the comments below. And then we can have a nice discussion, because that's what YouTube's all about, right? Nice discussions, I think. I'm new to this, I don't know.
I don't think so, man.
No? Okay. Well, you know, leave your shit anyway. Also, leave me some criticisms or whatever. This is one of my first attempts at making a video, first one on camera, so tell me what I can do better, and tell me what my cameraman can do better, and tell us what we all could do better, you know? Make me happy. Just don't be too mean, because that's not nice.
You won't be happy on YouTube. No one's happy on YouTube.
But I want to be a millionaire. Isn't this how we do it?
Sometimes.
Get viral? Can we get viral, please?
I don't want the flu.
I'm done.